Levels of being. We can begin by saying that a typical feature in us will attract a typical event. In speaking about chief feature, P.D. Ouspensky would say that chief feature is comparable with a number of typical features that constitute chief feature. These commentaries have addressed different levels of being that can be illustrated as lines, parallel lines, like the wires on telephone or telegraph poles. It was pointed out that if we could but raise the level of our being, even just a little, through work on ourselves, which is the only way to accomplish this, we might get to the next parallel line above our present level, thereby leveling up, and avoiding a number of unpleasant things that would inevitably happen should we remain on the same level. If we always behave typically, characteristically, and that of course means mechanically, if we are simply humanoid machines, reacting to life and to people always in the same manner as we have previously reacted, then we shall continue to follow one particular telegraph wire, one line of being. Like the train on a monorail, we shall always be following the lowest level of our being, which is its mechanical level. In this way, we remain things, objects affected through chance and circumstance, subject to accident and shock, according to any of the many influences that we fall under in each moment. A person who does this does not transform their life in the least possible way, so life always meets them in exactly the same manner. The same things, the same situations, the same misunderstandings, the same difficulties always meet this individual. In a way you can, as it were, deduce your level of being from noticing what continually happens to you, because your level of being attracts your life. This means that your life is your being. Your life is an expression of what you are. Hence, our being is what we are, and all that happens to us in life is the result of our level of being. Consequently, if you grow perfectly satisfied with your life just as it is, then there is no necessity for you to attempt to change your level of being. However, people who say that they are satisfied with their lives are not really so at all. They say things like, "I am quite satisfied with my life, but I dislike this or that person very much," or "I did not have a fair chance at that," "I am very concerned about someone," "I do not seem to get on as planned, in the way that I should like, for I always have these recurring difficulties. These people do not seem to like me. I do not think I am appreciated as I should be," and so on. Yet they claim that they are satisfied with their lives. People rarely see any connection between their being and their lives. One reason for this is that no one realizes that what happens to them in life has anything to do with their level of being. People do not see that their level of being attracts all those things they regard as having nothing to do with themselves. The work, however, teaches that it is our level of being which attracts all of this, and keeps us constantly under its influence. P.D. Ouspensky would ask his students, "Can you see your level of being at all? Can you see where you stand in the order of being? What are we able to understand about levels of being? Do we grasp how deeply this work is based upon different levels, from the ray of creation descending, and how everything is at a certain level of being within that vast scheme, reaching right up to the being of creation itself? The question arises from a practical sense: how can we change our level of being? And what is it that we have to do in order to accomplish and maintain this without backsliding? The answer lies within the entire body of work on self, which is aimed at changing our being, providing both practice and method in order to accomplish this. The Sermon on the Mount is a practical illustration of how to change one's level of being. If we take the first phrase, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven," Levels of jhana or bliss are a wonderful thing to encounter, and this work says the practice of non-identifying begins with not identifying with ourselves. If we are full of ourselves, then we tend to become rich in spirit. However, if we begin to observe ourselves through what the work teaches about identifying, we can become poorer in spirit, and so not identify with ourselves quite as much. What would the result be? We'd find what for us represents bliss. We'd find a source of enormous relief, and along with that, a strange sense of happiness, in no longer having to maintain the idea of ourselves with which we have been so identified. Here is a practical method of changing one's level of being. The work speaks of many such methods which have to be applied in the moment. All practical work on self, all instruction given in terms of the original teaching, belong to methods of changing our being. Realizing through practice what the work teaches is a good thing when we reach that stage in work where we understand that it is about something entirely practical, about daily practice and not dogma or ritual. That all these phrases, the formulations that are shared, represent real instruction as to what needs to be done in order to change our level of being, the level we find ourselves at mechanically through happenstance. Another phrase from the Sermon on the Mount can be referenced here. Blessed are the meek, which means those who are meek will attain bliss, inner happiness, and find inner peace. We'll get something that everyone is looking for because no one is happy internally. No one has that strange source of inner happiness known as jhana. People often think that blessedness is what is going to happen later on, in some distant future, perhaps even after our material demise. However, from a work point of view, as well as the testament of the Gospels, this is not the right way to take the profound idea that is indicated. We can achieve a source of inner happiness right here, right now, if we apply the ideas of work to ourselves. So what does meek mean in the original sense of the Greek word? It means not resentful. In other words, blessed are those who are not resentful. We can connect this with that phrase used in work which says that we must stop making internal accounts. When we are resentful, we are busy making internal accounts. We are considering internally, busy weighing and judging, measuring and accounting, obsessing with balances like Scrooge McDuck. The Sermon on the Mount begins with the practice of non-identifying with ourselves. Putting this into the phrase, those who are poor in spirit will attain bliss. A person that is full of themselves, an individual completely identified with the self, is someone that will not be able to reach any different level of being, where different influences begin to act upon them. Things that will fill up that extraordinary absence of inner happiness that afflicts everyone, if they are honest, and realize what they suffer from. If someone can observe the self, then cease to identify with ego quite as much, with their pictures of themselves, with their vanity, their self-worth, imaginings, and so on, then they will be able to practice being meek in the real sense of the Greek term. They will not be so resentful when people do not behave toward them as they think they ought to behave. They will not make so many internal accounts against others, and might eventually reach the state mentioned in the Lord's Prayer as being able to cancel the debts of others against them completely. This is the real meaning of the Greek word translated as forgiveness in the phrase, "Forgive us our debts as we forgive others their debts against us." The meaning of this phrase is far more powerful than simple forgiveness and far more practical. The meaning implies cancelling in full. From this we can see how closely the teaching of work on self with regard to not making internal accounts comes to what is written in the scriptures. This work is always said to be esoteric, the inner meaning and fragrance of teaching that has survived the ravages of time as we know it. The New Testament speaks a great deal about the kingdom of heaven and what it is necessary to do in order to ascend. saying that we have to become quite a different person in order to have any chance at all. They also note that, unless someone becomes as a little child, they cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. So, what does that mean in a practical sense? Work on self talks not about the kingdom of heaven, but about the conscious circle of humanity, and by this implies people of a much higher level of being than we find ourselves at, such as we are now. The Christ lays down certain rules, various indications, and specific teachings about how to get to the kingdom of heaven, which are given in the Sermon on the Mount, and lay out a clear indication as to how we might reach that conscious circle of humanity, through work on our being, by working on our level of being such as we are today. The Sermon on the Mount cannot be understood as translated, save through what we have been given by this work. The means we have been given by work, in a practical sense, that can help to understand what the opening verses, which have been so badly translated by ignorant people, really mean. We can understand what it means to be poor in spirit in the right way. The next level of being awaiting us is found in the kingdom of heaven. What for us is the conscious circle of humanity. It is no good speculating about matters remote from us, because the whole matter is close at hand. In fact, closer than your neck vein. The kingdom of heaven, our conscious circle of humanity, is our next level of being, which lies very close to, but very distinct from, our present level of being. That is why it's a good thing to work on yourself. And once we begin to see this, we feel that we have something that no one can ever take away from us. We begin to understand what this work is about, what the kingdom of heaven represents, what the conscious circle of humanity means on our scale. Each of us can become a little more conscious than we are presently. Each one of us can live a little more consciously than we do. Each of us can feel the force of work entering us through the ordinary affairs of each day. We can do this work if we feel it and if we desire to. We cannot do in life, but we can do this work. George Gurdjieff would say that we must remember that we can do this work, as what would be the purpose of teaching a system of work that no one could do? He said, "Everyone should say aloud to themselves, 'I can work.' We can all do this and get force from it. I can work, because this is what we can all do. I can remember myself according to my own level of being. I can separate from negative emotions according to my own state and my own level. I can stop making internal accounts. I can practice non-identifying. I can stop fantasizing. I can stop self-justifying, and so on. Even if it is only for a short while, yet we are still working if we can do this, and it will gradually change our level of being. Not downward, but upward, not outward, but inward. Through this coming under different influences, better influences, in other words that belong to our next level of being, the next telegraph wire, close to and above us. We will never level up, however, unless we practice working on ourselves. We cannot practice unless we begin to feel its benefit, and so value it as one of the most important things we have encountered. If we do not have deep feeling for this work, and if we do not comprehend that it's about something other than what we've always done, then it will simply pass into our ordinary level of being, our mechanical being, becoming twisted, distorted, and useless. There is discontinuity in the universe. This has been discovered and verified through experiment. In other words, there are different levels discontinuous with one another. The level of being awaiting us just above our present line, our psychological evolution, inner development and inner growth, is discontinuous with our present level. Just as one rung of a ladder is contiguous with the next, we have to step up or jump to get there. We cannot apply the same methods of thinking we have at our present level of being to work, because the work comes down to us from above, and we have to go from where we are upward towards it. We may argue that it's a very good thing to be identified because it represents the sum of what we have acquired. However, the work says it's not, and we need to see for ourselves through inner experience and long self-observation that it is not conducive to identify. The work comes down very close to us, but it is not on the same level. Suppose one has been in this work for some time, heard many things said in the work, and taken all these things just on the level of their being, such as it is now. Then they have never tried to apply the work, but simply listened to it. They have never observed themselves from what this work teaches, have no work-observing eyes formed in them, have never seen where and how they are identified with themselves, have never observed their pictures of self-imagination, the fantasy of their personality, have never observed their forms of internal considering and making accounts. They have never observed when they lie, mostly to themselves, have never observed their forms of self-justifying, never observed different eyes in themselves or different centers. They remain asleep at their level of being, and however earnestly they might cry out that they want the work, this is not believed in their heart. We have to take things differently, and the work shows us in what way we must begin to take things from here. Even if we have behaved badly, if we have given way to negative emotion and worse experiences, if we have reacted mechanically, we can still go back and see where we went to sleep and in some way correct it. Remember next time that you have to live more consciously, for this work is about how to live more consciously in mechanical life.